I'm Ben Paskowitz, CEO of NTS Tire Supply in Redwood Falls, Minnesota. Today I'm here with Scott Sloan, Global Ag and LSW Product Manager for Titan International. Hello, Scott.
How you doing?
Good.
Hey, you know what? I'm gonna admit, you got that right for the first time. When people try and get my title, it's like a word salad half the time. So good job doing that. But
Before we kind of launch into the Titan Goodyear brand, we'd like to play a little bit of tire trivia. What is the typical durometer, which is the hardness, the durometer range of the, on farm tires, of the tire tread?
which tire tread?
What would be a typical range?
Implement or
Like the
radial?
Let's go with the.
Okay, so typically our radial ag tires, we shoot for a short durometer of anywhere from 70 to 72.
Okay,
short durometer. Your implement tires, maybe not as talking about cost and being competitive. Typically, you're going to find these are in the 55 to 60 durometer range. So a little bit softer.
Pretty big range. Wouldn't it be different in the face than it would be on like the sidewall?
Absolutely. Yep. So on a radial tractor, you're looking at 70, 72. On the sidewall, you're probably in that 50, 55 because it has to flex, right? So the harder a tread compound is, I get that all the time. Why don't you just make it harder, and that way the stubble doesn't hurt it? Well, you get it to the point where it's too hard, and then it's like a coat hanger. And then when it flexes, you start getting cracking at the base of the lug and things like that. It's a very fine balance between flexibility and hardness for stock penetration. You play with that balance all the time when we're running compound trials, which we do all the time.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. How would you make it harder versus softer? Is it?
Well, there's different ways of doing that. We can use, there are hardening resins that you can put into the compound and actually mix it into the compound to, when it cures out, it cures harder. The types of carbon black, which is the binding structure with the monomer chains and all that. When you cure rubber, higher structure carbon black tends to be harder and so forth. So we can play around with the compound a lot.
So during vulcanization, what's the element that they use to cross-link the rubber traditionally?
Well, typically sulfur is the curative agent that creates the reaction. Charles Goodyear didn't make any tires. He invented the vulcanization process. So the vulcanizing of, you've got your rubber monomers and they're just a loose chain, and when you cross-link them, that's when it becomes rubber that we see.
All right, well you're ace in this. The last one we got is going to be a little more relevant to the rest of our conversation, but maybe you could explain why are tall sidewall tires more prone to power hop when you're doing field?
Well, the tire's getting too much traction. It's buckling and then this explosive force. So, as tire guys, what we do, we'll typically add air to the tire that creates more slip, so it's not biting as hard and wrinkling that sidewall.
All right, very good. That's helpful. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in the farm tire industry.
So I actually graduated from the University of Northern Iowa. Go Panthers. I was just starting, married and needed a job, and I didn't care what I did, so I jumped in and took a job as a scheduler at Firestone, which we schedule the components to build the tires to make sure you get the right plies and the right tread and everything to the tire machines. And then I did that for a year, and then I went into supervision for about 3 years. Finally, I was able to get into the engineering department at Firestone, so I became a tire engineer at Firestone. Did that for 4 or 5 years, and then got promoted to engineering manager at the Titan facility. So I had all the tire engineers and compounders and fabric engineers reporting to me. So then was promoted to vice president of research and development. In 2006, Titan purchased the Goodyear farm tire asset. So that's how we got involved with Goodyear. All of our R&D monies and investments in equipment and testing and everything that we do is 100% focused on ag and off-road type tires. Then I would say in 2012, I got promoted to this Cush sales and marketing job of product manager. So I built we'll talk about it later, but the LSW concept. We had that idea back in '98. That's how long I've been dealing with low sidewall technology. And the first tire.
Was that your idea back then?
It was actually Maury's idea. And his idea was, one, he wanted to be different. He didn't want to do the Me Too stuff. He didn't want to go and just compete on price. That's just a race to the bottom. So if we could come up with a concept to differentiate ourselves from the competitors and show a credible advantage to using that technology, that's a win, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody's going to want it. So we built a 12/16/5 skid steer. We made it a 12/21.5. It was the very first LSW that we built. And we kind of played around in the industrial tires, the telehandlers. We have instead of a 1324, it's a 1300 33.5. And we were just mixing it, and we made the wheels.
Which you realize that's a nightmare for the tire dealer.
Yes, it is, right? And also, people don't know, Titan also makes the wheels. So 9 out of 10 tractors running around in North America, if you look at it, it'll say Titan EW, which means a Titan electric wheel. And that's the plant in Quincy, Illinois. So we're 85% of the North American market on OE tractors. So we make
a huge percentage.
It is. We produce more agricultural wheels than anybody in the world in Quincy, Illinois. Since we made the wheels, we can make any configuration, any size, any width, any bead taper on the tires that we wanted. And that's where he was coming up with some of this half stuff, 15-degree tapers. He was playing with an 11-degree taper on some of it. We're just kind of playing around with it. And I always kid people, I got a mold storage area full of great ideas, right? Because we were just, trying this, it didn't work. We tried this, it didn't work. And
that was, you were primarily overseeing that whole division?
Yep. Yep. And then back, it's probably 07, 08, we decided to go into the larger ag stuff. And the first size that we did was a 870R38, which is very common on four-wheel drive tractors, duals. But it has a 70 aspect ratio. We talked about aspect ratio. Well, what we did is we shrunk it to a 55 aspect ratio and put a 46-inch wheel in it. That's where we came up with the 800.
The 800 was the first big LSW.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
We were very self-sufficient at the Des Moines plant. We were able to modify the molds and put a new sidewall plate, but use the same tread ring in the mold, and then put new sidewalls in it, sidewall plates. 46. So we could go back to the 38 if we wanted to, but we went to the 46. That very first set, and matter of fact, we just posted a video here a while back, but that original set we spotted in 2009, is still running in the over in Marengo, Illinois, with Peterson Farms.
Wow.
We didn't even have anything marked on the sidewall because we didn't know if it was going to work or not. And it's on its third tractor right now. That set is still on its third tractor. So,
wow.
Yeah, so it's been cool. And then we had the 710 came along, and we had the 1145R46 LSW. We built the very first prototype of that in 2004. But the thing with that tire was it was so big. At that time, it was the world's largest ag tire, but there wasn't a piece of equipment that would fit on because it was just too tall.
That was the 1100.
Yep, the 1145/46. We got it to fit. We might have used some cutting materials to clear some fenders, but some guys were willing to try it, and so we were modifying tractors to get it to fit under the the fender wells. And a lot of combines got put under that tire, and it's transitioned over. We had the 1100, 800, and then we came out with our 1250, 35/46, and then the largest ag tire now is the 1400. So it's just kind of grown from there. There's a story behind every one of them, I'll tell you that.
It's actually interesting. We, one of our things at NTS Tires, helping farms get the right tire system on their equipment. So we get creative with that, and similar to Titan's story, in 2015, we got rid of all automotive and medium truck just to focus on ag.
Yep. It makes a difference. You keep your eye on the ball, definitely.
It changes the type of people you hire.
Mm-hmm.
Our sales team all have a farming background, and it changes a lot of things when you have that focus.
Mm-hmm.
So hats off to Titan for doing that. Where LSWs became a big part of our journey at NTS was, I think it was 2019 possibly, when it was a really wet harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And farms were just looking for a solution on their combines to get through the mud. Well, 1400s were not available for combines, so we modified them and made them available for combines.
Remember that.
And I think that was probably a big step forward actually in the whole LSW thing, because it got a lot of buzz, if you will, to have these 1400s on combines.
Yeah, I remember our media guy said, "Hey, can we repost this on our Facebook page or whatever social media?" I said, "What is it?" He said, "Well, 1400s on a combine." I said, "We don't have that fitment yet." So yeah, you guys were pushing the envelope before we were.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that, as long as you explain the risk to the farmer.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's a solution that we think is going to work and they're willing to try it and it does work, that's a win.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And when you're doing something new, there's always a risk, right?
Exactly.
And I tell you what, farmers typically don't want to be the first one, but they certainly don't want to be the last guy in. So if you can get that one or two guys kind of convinced that this is going to work, and then once it works, there's this huge vacuum of people getting in on the technology because they don't want to be the last one with that type of technology on.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Crossing the chasm to that next level where you get the
And we, and it's funny because LSW has kind of become its own brand. They don't even really equate
it's
it to
become
Goodyear.
really a key part of Goodyear Titan's strategy.
It is,
hasn't it?
but people don't call it Goodyear LSW. They call them LSW. They think it's literally its own LSW brand.
Yeah.
It's just a technology, but certainly it's under the Goodyear name.
So the big footprint, as part of working with farms, helping them get the right tire system, a lot of what we're talking about is, hey, how can we increase your footprint, decrease your air pressure so that we can increase your yields? Because at the end of the day, that's...
Well, it's compaction, right? And that's what everybody's fighting. This equipment, I've yet have a OE manufacturer come to me saying, I've got this idea for this new piece of equipment. It's going to be 10,000 pounds lighter and go 10 miles an hour slower, right? Everything is bigger and faster. And the demands of tires these days, and just farming in general, right? You think about it, farmers now, they're buying 80 here and 80 here and 80 here, and all of a sudden they're eroding, 50 miles at a shot, right? Then you start talking about tracks. Well, eroding in tracks is, like water and oil, and that's where tires really shine, is when you got to make the big moves, and tires is definitely the way to go with that.
So why is, there's obviously a lot of advantages we're talking about with LSWs. Why is Goodyear still the only company building those low sidewall tires?
Well, technically we're not. We just call it LSW. We trademarked it. You can't patent tire size. I mean, you can make we can make any tire size you want. Of course, you got to play within the bounds of tire and rim and ETRTO, the governing, sanctioned, groups. But so you couldn't really stake claim on a tire size, but we did stake claim on the concept of a lower sidewall. You've got our competitor, Mitas, Trailerborg, those guys have got their 710, 6546, 85546 for sprayer flotation stuff. Then you got offshoots, like the 750, 6046. It's all the same, but just different.
Yeah, I didn't realize they made a 855 46. Mm-hmm. Does anybody make the 1100 or the?
No, but I was at Agritechnica last year, and there is a company in China that's actually got it on their development list. Wow. So we're expecting that. You know what? We knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. It was just the finger pointing of us trying to push this concept and think that we were just off our rocker. Right. I always kid people. We've been thrown out with Maury. We've been thrown out of boardrooms more than once, just with the crazy idea that it doesn't work. And
was that out of your own Titan boardrooms?
No, like the Deeres and the Cases of the world. Just thought it was crazy. Yeah. On the engineering side of it just doesn't make any sense. And nobody else has it, so why would we?
Yeah. So
what we did is in true Maury fashion, we did the big Maury Farm blitz back in the late 2000, early 2010s, and he found a list of 147 of the largest growers in America. He dropped down in his jet and talked him into trying a set of LSWs for his four-wheel drive, 800s at the time, 1100s on combines. All the sizes that we see now are just like standard stuff. But these guys didn't know what they were. But these guys buy a lot of equipment, and if it worked for them, then they could start pressuring up to the John Deeres of the world and the Cases of the world that, hey, there's a need for this and we want it. And these guys buy a lot of tractors, so they're a bit influential. So we basically did the grassroots groundswell of demand, and finally got the John Deeres and the Cases of the world to buy it up.
It's a lot of work launching a new product like that. You and Maury put a lot of work into that.
He did. That guy he's amazing. He's a pure entrepreneur. He refuses to take no for an answer, and he'll do whatever it takes. And I always kind of kid he's the Trump before Trump. I mean, he literally believes in what he's doing.
Didn't you run for president once?
He did. In 1996, he was he made it to New Hampshire primaries. He's a pretty amazing guy.
So on the LSWs, what's the next big thing for that? Right now you've got a 1400. Are we going to see like a 1600 or taller or?
So that's a good question, right? I'm gonna quiz you. So how can we make footprints bigger? What are two ways we can make footprints bigger with a tire?
Longer and wider.
Okay. A.
That's the two ways that you can do it.
That is, right? You can go wider or you can go longer. But how do you make a tire longer?
By having a taller sidewall, probably.
Exactly.
And running it at lower
So
air
the
pressure.
problem is right now is we are pinched on the envelopes that we're fitting in. So right now, on most four-wheel drive tractors, you're looking at probably that 82, 83-inch tall diameter. That's your 870/38, your 710, 70/42s. That's called a Group 48 tire. That's kind of where we're stuck.
Yeah.
If they would give us more room to go up, we don't necessarily have to go wider, but going up would make a big difference.
Because that makes it longer, essentially.
The only tractors that we have right now is the Fendt 1000 series that they will take a Group 50 or about a 90-inch tall tire on the back of that tractor. And we actually built a tire at one time back in, honestly, right when we took over Goodyear, it was a 480 95 54.
Yeah, okay.
Right? This is back in 06.
Yeah, that'd be a tall tire.
It is a tall tire. But Case scrapped the project, and so the mold sat in our storage area, right?
What's it cost to make a mold like that?
These days, it's hard to say. That one was probably 180 grand. I don't know. I don't really remember. There's a lot of money sitting in our storage area.
Yeah.
But now you look at it. So Fendt came out with this tractor, this 1000 series, and it takes they're putting the 480 95 50 on that rear of that 1000 series, but they still had room for that other 4 inches, right? So at Farm Progress in Decatur 6 years ago, I pulled that mold out of storage, 480 95 54, matched with a 380 90R 46 on the front.
That's
right?
crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Massive front tire.
Right, and it worked. So, Mark Toberdorf is in Germany is where they built that tractor, and I actually went over to Mark Toberdorf and discussed it with them, and we went back and forth, and they just decided it wasn't for them, right?
Yeah, okay.
But lo and behold, who has that tire now? Do you know?
That rear one?
Yeah.
480 95 54. No idea.
Trailerborg.
What?
Trailerborg has.
Trailerborg does. Okay.
Yeah. So, but AGCO is in with they're tied to the hip with Trailerborg, and I get
okay.
it. But
So
we
they're using an OEM something then?
Yep. So
you guys
we
get that?
what I'm saying is we did the legwork, and they come in and swoop and get all the glory. But that's fine. It just reassures us that we're on the right track with thinking out of the box. Like you said, you gotta keep pushing those applications and putting stuff into tires on machines that people just think you couldn't get it to work.
So the lower air pressure and a longer footprint. You're familiar with the CTIS, Central Tire Inflation System. Talk about that. What do you see? Where do you see CTIS over the next few years?
That's a great question. I get it all the time. I always like to put analogies. I'm kind of an analogy guy. Remember when you were growing up in high school and you got into a buddy's car and it was his parents' car and it happened to have the electric windows, right? And it's like, oh my God, this has got electric windows. How cool is this, right? But not all cars had electric windows, right? Everything had the cranks.
Right.
Well, we're in the high school phase of electric windows in cars on the CTIS systems. There's some guys that have it. Trailerborg has an onboard system now. Deere, I haven't seen many of them, but they offer an inflation system. There's a bunch of aftermarket stuff. But I think cost is always, how do you quantify the cost of that system?
Yeah.
Well, again, compaction, trying to show the benefits of it. That's what we're doing now is the education part of it. But I think my prediction in the next 10 years, 95% of the tractors coming out of factories will probably have some sort of a CTIS system. And I think, organizations like NTS is going to be selling a lot more of them because people, IF and VF technology. IF means increased flexion, which means that if you had a tire that carried 100 pounds at 100 PSI, you can now carry that 100 pounds at 80 PSI or 20% less inflation pressure. VF.
And that gives you the longer footprint.
It gives you, so when you let air out of the tire, what happens? The tire gets flat and it gets a longer footprint. It can only get so wide because that's just the tread width is the only width you get, but you get the length, right? VF, same thing, 100 PSI at 100 pounds. Now we can run it at 60 PSI, which is 40% less.
Big difference.
That's huge. We're taking practically half the air out of the tire, right? For years and years and years, we're saying keep air in the tire, keep air in the tire. IF and VF have been around for almost 25, going on 28 years now. That's how long it's been around. And it's now just getting really where people are talking about it all the time. I think that people spending money on that type of technology, especially on tractors that operate at the lower end of the inflation pressure range. I always find it interesting, like a John Deere 9000 series, you can click on an option for an IF 87038 Firestone. If you've scaled up a 9000 series, right, with an 87038, you could run with conventional tire, you could run 6 PSI in the rear and 8 PSI in the front all day. You're looking at a 54,000 pound tractor, right? So now this guy spends whatever, $7,000 more to go to drop 2 PSI in the front.
So you're basically, since you're already that low of air pressure, there's not much more.
Is that a value?
Yeah.
That's to me, that's not a value.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about self-propelled sprayers. We're at 78 PSI. That was the 380 90R46 168 load index, which is 12,300 pounds, was the highest inflation pressure tire in the industry for 10 years, right? And now they kept adding, it was 80-foot booms, 90-foot booms. Now we're at 120-foot booms, going wider. Now you got all the see and spray stuff, right? They just keep throwing stuff onto this piece of equipment, and something had to be done because, first of all, the rims, you start adding cost to the wheels to make them strong enough to hold 78 PSI. That's a lot of air in a pretty good sized tire. So IF got introduced, and we were able to drop it 20 PSI, and then VF came along, and we were able to get the inflation pressure down to like 60 PSI because in the complicated world of the tire industry, you get another plus up for going 15 miles an hour. They took 20% for just the sheer load and another 20% to cover the 15% that you got on conventional tires for a slower speed, because IF and VF, you don't get plus ups as it goes slower, or at least you didn't back in the day. To me, it was a big shell game. But I think moving forward, you're going to see that with these onboard inflation systems. A classic example, let's just say 480 ADR50 rears on let's just say a Magnum tractor, right? Mechanical front wheel drive, 340, whatever it is. The worst condition that those tires will ever typically see is just what we experience here is spring planting, right? And you got this big old DB or big old planter on that rear end of that.
Center fill.
Right,
center fill,
right?
Yeah.
You're putting 10, 12,000 extra pounds on that tire, right? Well, that tire has to carry that load. So you got to pump that air up to be able to carry that load just to get to the field, right? Well, then you unfold this thing. Now you're extremely overinflated. That's where it gets hurt. That's where, I always say, you think a farmer's going to hop out of his cab, and spend the next 15 minutes letting air out of his tire to get it down to the right inflation pressure. And then when he's done, he folds it back up, then he spends the next 40 minutes putting air back into the tires. He's not going to do that. It's a compromise. And that's what farmers do every day is they make a compromise for whatever tasks they're doing. Now with the CTIS systems, you get to the field, he's unfolding, dumps the air in the tires, and now he's down, instead of 23, 28 PSI, he could be down to 9 PSI and helping himself on the compaction thing. Yeah. That's where it's going to pick up, is those types of applications.
Yeah, and there's been, originally when we first started talking to people about it, when we first started really promoting it in 2021, there was maybe 1 out of 10 or 15 farmers that even knew what we're talking about. Now it's 9 out of 10.
Yep.
They see it, they know about it, and they're watching it. Rob Hildesheim, he was a key part of educating our customers about it, and he was fantastic at getting the word out, explaining the concept, because he farmed himself, he knew the benefits. His analogy, similar idea, was auto steer. When it first came out, it's like, why do I need auto steer?
Now you talk to guys, they would never farm without auto steer now. It's just, again, that's another technology that it's like a little slow to, we don't need that. And then all of a sudden you
now
can't.
Everybody has it. And
Right.
I agree. I think it's going to be the same thing for CTIS.
It will be for sure.
So I guess let's go to discussing we'll move into talking specifically about Goodyear Titan tires, your different models. But just before we jump into that specifically, we'll just do another little game here.
Okay.
And I'm just going to give you a scenario where you're a farmer, and you're given a choice of getting a piece of equipment to do your high-speed tillage with.
Okay.
So it's either going to be like a 4-wheel drive wheeled tractor, or let's say a quad track, or any variation thereof. So tires versus tracks, high-speed tillage, money's not an issue. What setup would you choose for that application, and maybe explain why?
Well, it depends where you're at. Are you in the hills of
Put us in our territory.
okay,
here in
so
southern
let's say
Minnesota,
Midwest
Iowa.
here, right?
Yeah.
So relatively flat. I would put any tire, especially LSW tires, whether they're dual 800s, dual 900s, 1100 singles, 1250 singles, or 1400 singles, I would put it up against a track machine any day. If you Google Goodyear Farm Tire channel, we've got 100 plus videos of end users using our stuff. And we've done so many field trials with tillage against quad track before Deere even had the 4-track, and then with the 4-track. And I've yet to be run out of a field, whether I'm running dual 800 5546s or 1400s on a 9560 R versus an RX. Again, we talked about value, right? We did this, one of the very first demos was back in 2015. God, it's been 10 years ago already. It was over in Sloan Implement over in Assumption, Illinois. And this big farmer ran through a lot of tractors through Sloan, and the 4-track was coming out. And at that time, the price difference between a 4-track and a wheeled machine was almost $120,000. That's just initial cost, the right price.
Yeah.
We got into the field, and I was with the big farmer and his son was running the 4-track, and there was 2720 disc rippers is what we had. And we were running through the field, and he thought that track machine was just gonna run, right? And it didn't. And you could see halfway through the run through the field, he's going, okay, you know. And they weren't running any of the field crews or anything. They were just trying to run the machines as hard as they possibly could. And it was a dead heat. Every trial that I've ever done with LSWs versus a track machine, whether it's a red track or a green track, we've never been beaten. It's always a draw. But when we first started doing it, we would put it up against an 870-38 conventional tire with the same tool behind it. And every time that 870-38, by the end of the field, it would be a tractor and implement or two behind the LSWs in the track machine. And we were talking about earlier about power hop, right?
Yeah.
So this tractor's sitting there, and he's hopping. He couldn't keep the tractive efficiency to the ground, and every time he get in the air, he's losing ground, you know, to the people that, you know, the machines that can keep the power to the ground. And that's the nice thing about LSW is without that hopping, you're keeping all that tractive efficiency to the ground. And by the way, all of our LSWs are VF technology. So, you know, it's LSW, but it says replaces VF 800 5546. So we're able to run those lower inflation pressures and not get the power hop, where conventional tires, you know, they can run lower inflation pressure, but if they run into an everyday issue like power hop, they're adding air to the tire, which defeats any advantage that IF or VF gave them, right? Because they're just trying to get through the field without getting knocked through the roof of the cab, right? To me, that's a value.
Yeah.
And like I said, in that particular scenario, if you have enough horsepower, you know, those high speed, they take a lot of power to pull that stuff, right? And not to mention, it takes 40 horse per corner to run the tracks.
40.
40.
Wow.
So you're taking, you know, 160 horsepower away from the pulling power just to run the mechanics of that track. Where wheels is just the axle, right? So
Okay. So definitely the LSW setup is probably
definitely
the one
that would be if somebody would ask me, that would be. Now whether they're, you know, they don't like the super singles for whatever reason, they want to stay the conventional duals. I know up in this area, up here in Minnesota, dual 900s is very popular. A little bit more footprint. You know, you got wider roads, and you know things are a little easier to get around with. You get into central Illinois when, you know, the roads are only 12 foot wide. It's tough getting a dual machine down through there, and that's the big advantage of, you know, that people like about tracks is the narrow roading width. But with the super single LSWs, you're about as narrow as a track machine.
Very good. So I think OptiTrack is kind of a flagship model for you, isn't it?
It is. So when we acquired Goodyear in 2006, they were actually in the process of converting the STR, super traction radial, line to the OptiTrack. The OptiTrack has a little more of a curvature to the bar, a little more of a 45-degree angle in the bar. It was just an optimized super traction radial, basically what it was. So what we've done over the past, 20 years is we've worked away all of the super traction radials in our line. There might be one or two oddball sizes that we haven't gotten to, but for the most part, super traction radial is dead, and now is the OptiTrack. And that would be
does it also replace the DT800s then too?
funny story on that. I'd like to say that I'm the one that killed the DT numbers, because in the Goodyear world, the DT800 was designating section widths.
DT800, that's what
So
that meant, or what?
DT800 was everything 480 and down.
Yeah, okay.
So your DT 830s are 710 and up tires. Your
Yeah, I
DT 820s were like your 650 46s, and nobody understood it, and nobody got it. And you could have at the time a super traction radial tread pattern that was a DT 800. And the OptiTrack, that was DT 800, and somebody would call and say, hey, I got a problem with this DT 800, and go, what is the tread? Does it say OptiTrack on the side, or does it say super traction on it? Because they weren't exactly the same, obviously they're not the same mold. And you'll notice on our sidewalls now, we actually went through and revamped all the stamping, the logos and everything on the side of the tire, because through the years, depending on who was drawing up the stamping drawings on of the sidewall, it could have been a different guy doing it, and he used a different size font. Sometimes the Goodyear was this tall, other times the Goodyear was this tall. It was just all over the place. So what we did is we went through an entire line, and we determined that everything is going to be in this orientation, and that's what you're seeing today. And in the meantime, while we did that, we got rid of the DT 800 numbers. So the DTs are dead.
Right. All right. The OptiTorque, now that's kind of a similar tire, it seems like, but it's, it's
the
R1. Like
right, exactly. So I was just going to say, so the OptiTrack is our flagship Tier 1 R1W tire. That's our basically our OE tire. That's the premium tire. It's a very beefy tire, robust, I guess, as a lot of people say, and we have the full complement of sizes on that. The OptiTorque was basically we designed that for sprayer applications, right?
Yep, okay.
So you started, you think about sprayer flotation stuff, you talk about 710s and 800s. And even before that, the 650, 65, 38 is that's like the commodity sprayer float conversion because it fits on every sprayer, right? Everything from a 400 series Deere or a 4030 or 38 to the 800s, which is the larger sizes. But they're all R1W tires.
Because they don't need the deep tread.
You don't need the deep tread. There's some guys that'll say, I'd like to have that. But you think about what sprayers do, right? One, they're in the field. They're just trying to get it in and out of the field without being noticed, right? You don't want to see the track. You don't even want to know it was there, right? And you got to go between fields, right? We were talking about, how
of eroding. Yeah.
So what we did with the with the OptiTorque is it's the same lug angle, basically the same lug angle as the OptiTrack, but it's an R1 tread depth, right? Shallower tread depth, so it's not leaving that deep cleat mark in your field. So you hear complaints about the planters chattering as it runs across that cleat mark. And also, the lug is a lot wider, so there's a lot more lug to void ratio, we call it. The other thing is we took the lug angle of the OptiTrack and we put the kind of that bigger nose on the lug like our Ultra Sprayer. Again, we're getting more rubber on the ground, so when it roads, it's not wearing as fast. Some of these, I'll pick on Michelin. The old, before they came out with a spray bib, they were just using agribibs for it and had this long, skinny lug, and it's just squirming on the road, and it just doesn't work. So that's why everybody's kind of reduced their tread depths to the R1 tread depth. Everybody's a little bit wider, got more pitches or more lugs on the tire. You want a lot of stuff on the ground when you're roading these machines, and that's kind of where the OptiTorque came about, was for the sprayer conversion.
For the wider sprayer tires.
Yeah, basically, we were really the first ones with an R1 in basically the 650 and up sizes.
Interesting.
Because honestly, other than now we got the Me Too guys coming in with the similar sizes, but we were the first ones out with that R1, what do you call it, wide metric sizes, everything from 650 up to 800.
That's interesting about the OptiTorque. So that's for the wide tires for sprayers. So the Ultra Sprayer, I think that tire you've had for about 20 years.
We released it the year we took over Goodyear in 2006.
Was that the first sprayer tire with wide lugs like that? Or?
And R1 also.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's the
I shouldn't say that, because we were running if you look at the evolution of the sprayer market, right? Remember 149R46? That was what it was. And remember the star rating tires? We started out as a 3-star, went to a 5-star, we went to a 7-star, 8-star. Then we were at a 10-star.
I didn't realize the stars went that high.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we converted over to metric, and then we converted over to load index, which we were running out of sidewall for all the stars, right? Because you think about it, 78 PSI, and that's what the star rating is based on is the pressure.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah. That's where it started out, and most of those tires were R1 tires, and Titan had the high traction lug, and that's what we used. And we've always kind of been in that R1 line, but other guys didn't really have, Michelin, obviously, they didn't make an R1 tire, so they had to use what they had on hand for that, and it wasn't quite right. But nonetheless, in 2006 is when we actually released the Ultra Sprayer. Since then, we've actually developed the Optic Torque to kind of take the place. We're probably going to eventually get rid of Ultra Sprayer.
See, the Ultra Torque will also be skinny tires, you're saying? Okay.
Yes. We have a 380 105/54 now.
Really?
In that size. That's an 86-inch tall tire. That's what I want to get the market to on these sprayers. We talked about giving an envelope to be able to fit it up underneath the fender. You can do it. You can move things around, but it'd be nice if the OEs would take a look at that and say, okay, this will work. But we haven't quite gotten there yet.
Yeah.
But with the Ultra Sprayer, when you put Ultra Sprayer on the side of the tire, there's nothing magical about it's the same compounds that's in 870-38. But when you put sprayer on the side of the tire, it kind of pigeonholes it.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And there's potato farmers and there's watermelon farmers and these guys that want an R1 in a narrow tire, but when it says sprayer on the side, it's not meant to be on a tractor. It's supposed to be a sprayer. So, we do have Ultra Sprayers running on tractors, but when they see it without us talking to them, they just look it over and say, well, it's a sprayer tire.
Yeah,
but it's actually just a regular radial tractor tire.
So if we go to the other end of the spectrum now and go to the really deep tread, like the custom flow grip tires.
Yep.
They've got a deep tread and a wide void. It kind of tell us about what the application is.
So the R2, and people might know it as the rice and cane tire, right? So if you've ever seen rice farming, they literally farm in a marsh. The custom flow grip, it's a multi-angle lug. So your angle is very sharp to the center, and then it pitches out. And what that does is the deep lug goes to the bottom of the muck and gets down kind of to the harder pan, and then with the space between the lugs, it actually helps pump that mud out from in front of that tire. They had the TD8 was the original R2 tire for Goodyear, but it had some flaws in itself. And the custom flow grip's technically, we call it an R2, but technically it's an HF4, which is a high flotation with a tread depth, a deep tread depth. And if anybody that's run it like our 1250 custom flow grip is, probably our most popular one, running on a combine, it actually rides pretty good.
Yeah,
on the road.
When it was the 2019 year, I remember we sold probably half of them were custom flow grips.
Yep. With the TD8, it was almost like rolling on stilts, right? A very vibrating ride with the lug design that was, and with the custom flow grip, it was a much smoother ride. And we're in the process of converting all of our TD8s over to our custom flow grip line now.
Yeah, okay. So the R14T, this one's kind of what I would call a hybrid, probably. I think we've sold quite a few of these to municipalities, but what's the pros and applications for that there?
So the R14, 9 out of 10 phone calls that I got was from a compact utility guy. He bought this Kubota tractor or this LS tractor, and it had ag tires on it. The barge, your regular R1 tires. But he's on pavement a lot more than he thought he was going to. At the point of sale, they have to decide, do you want ag, industrial, or turf tires? That's the big decision.
3 options, yeah.
3 options, right? And sure as the sun comes up, he picks the wrong one. So what do I got to do to get over to the industrial tires? Well, you got to change your wheels and your tires because the size nomenclature is different. They're just not interchangeable.
Yeah.
So that's when we came up with the concept. Well, why don't we come up with a hybrid? And this is before the big stuff. This is just on compact utility. Why don't we just come up with a hybrid tire that fills both voids, right? So when we sell to compact utility companies, 70 to 75% of the tractors that go out have industrial treads on them. Like your industrial
R4,
tractor, right, R4, because it kind of looks like a tractor tire, but it's got a little bit more void to it. Yeah, maybe if you get into some heavier, looser soil, maybe not working the best, but for the most part, it's better than just the ag tread. And then turf is like 5%. So we got, kicking it around, and it's like, well, why don't we, take the elements off of an industrial tire and put it into an ag tire, and then just kind of meld the two together, right? And so we did it over Christmas between Christmas and New Year's back in whenever 2015, 2016. It was me and our design guy across the hallway, R&D's right across the hallway. He spits out an idea. What if we make the space a little bit wider? So this element is actually, if you're familiar with our Titan MXL loader tire.
Yep. That does look very similar.
That is the element. Yeah. So that's kind of our little Where's Waldo on a lot of these new sizes is we'll throw this element in to it. So he threw that in there, and we put the same lug angle as the OptiTrack. That looks good. How about we put a little gash in the, for another biting edge?
Makes it, that's nice for snow removal.
Absolutely.
Too, more edges
so
like
the more
that.
edges that you have, exactly, that's a great point, is the more, we call them biting edges that you have, not only for drifting, like on, talk about municipalities, sliding down the ditch on, like typical R1W tires, it's just a big sled rail, right? And it just slides down where at least you've got edges. Hillside Combine, they use R3s because the button tread, because they have all those biting edges that they don't slide down the hill. Well, this is a good, hybrid. And so when we were developing it, we just called it, it's an R1 and R4. Our code in the design was R14. Well, that's how exotic our marketing development is we just use that name with the tire. Yeah, and we came up with that, and that was on the compact utility size, and it's taken over. Kubota had a 2-year exclusive for that tread design. LS is on it, Mahindra, everybody's on it. You see it everywhere now. And then we started pushing it up into these larger sizes, like your 480, 38, your 18-438s, your municipality tractors, that mid-size, not super high horsepower stuff. And so you got a lot of, what we'd like to say is we got a lot of lug to void ratio. So when you're on harder surfaces, you're carrying it on the center of the tire and on all the lug. When you go off into the softer stuff, there's enough distance between the lugs. Some of the competitors, whatever, multi-purpose tires, whatever, they're a lot closer. And when you get in muddier soils, it tends to fill and not clean. Yeah. With the gap that we have,
it clean out enough to keep
it cleans out much better. Yeah. So this has been a super huge success for us, and we've just released our 710 6546 sprayer conversion for this.
Yeah, okay. So they use that instead of an OptiTorque for a sprayer float, essentially.
And I think that you're going to see it's probably going to cannibalize our OptiTorque a little bit because people they want this tread because of the road. It roads a lot smoother. There's a lot of advantages to it. Some guys won't, but also we got it into 380, 90 R46 now. Yeah, we got a lot of new stuff going on with the R14.
It's fun when you come up with an innovation that takes off.
Yep.
So what about the Agra Edge?
So Agra Edge, in the world of Titan, we grew through acquisition, right? So we bought Armstrong. So all the molds said Armstrong tire on it. Armstrong, if those people don't remember, Armstrong took up like a third of the sidewall because it was big letters and it was this big on the side of the tire. So in order to, we called it Titanizing the molds, we actually had to put plates over those, that Armstrong, right? Anyway, that was when we swapped from Armstrong to Titan. Well, we bought Denman Tire, we bought Fidelity Tire, all their mold assets. We bought General Tire, had a plant in Mayfield, Kentucky. We bought all their molds. That's what Maury did, is he would buy all this tire equipment from all these plants that were kind of failing. He'd buy all the assets and he'd just park it in a warehouse, because his idea was that I might not be using it, but nobody's using it against me, type of thing. Was his, he's got all the gold, right? Nobody else can spend it. So what we would do is we would take these sizes of hodgepodge different mold lines, and if we needed a certain size, we would just put a Titan plate in it and call it a Titan tire. That's how we grew, right? Matter of fact, we had our AG49M line, which was a Titan line for forever.
Yeah.
The first molds that we were actually we're Pirelli, now Trailerborg TM molds. So we were building Pirelli TM 800s and 1000s in the Des Moines plant back in 1998. I mean, that's how connected all these tire companies are, right? But that AG49M line was actually that TM series line. We just called it AG49M. So that was our R1W line, and Anyway, we're this hodgepodge of, again, land of misfit toys. We're just trying to get tires, and AgriEdge came along, and this was the first time that we actually sat down. You know, competition has gotten very fierce, right?
Yeah.
We got a lot of offshore pressure.
A lot of them offshore brands are getting more accepted in the market.
Absolutely, and you know what? And you know, you could say all we want. Stuff runs relatively good. It's good stuff, right? Maybe not as attractive now as it used to be, but obviously it's works. And so what we did is we actually sat down and took what we felt were the features and benefits that an end user wants. He wants roading capability, he wants traction, he wants cleaning, and he wants that at a pretty decent price. So we took all that and developed the tread design, put it together, and then, you know, tires these days are becoming like passenger light truck tires, right? The sidewall markings have become pretty intricate as far as the engraving in the sidewall of the tire. We dressed up the sidewall and put all the bells and whistles on the tread pattern, and boom, we came up with AgriEdge. And that was a massive release. We released 27 sizes the first go around.
Wow.
The Des Moines plant was producing those tires. We did it in less than 2 years.
And that was all your own molds built from scratch, essentially.
Yep.
That's the difference with that.
So,
is that going to be kind of is that kind of the goal with that, to be your main generic tire, if you want to call it that?
Yep. I was going to say value brand. I mean, it's very, we price the Titan brand very competitively with, we call them the BAM products, BKT, Alliance, and Mitas. That's where we're targeting that tire. It's definitely a lighter construction as far as the number of lugs. It's not near as robust of a mold like I say our OptiTrack or even our AG49M tires. Those were really beefy, heavy tires, but from a cost standpoint, it didn't make any sense. So this was a perfect way of getting into that market and being able to meet not only the need for the performance side of it, but meet the cost need for the farmer that maybe wants to buy American, but you just can't afford it. And you get these offshore stuff that may be a little more competitively priced. It's an easier sale that way for that farmer.
Very good. All right. So I guess one of the things we did talk about quite a bit here was innovation, obviously, since that was you've been a key part of that for Titan for many years. Imagine a gap in the market right now. I'm sure you've done this many times, but if you can imagine a gap in the market, and what tire would you design for it? Describe how that would look and the size.
Whoa. Well, I actually kind of thought about it again today on the drive up. I don't know if you do this when you're driving like on a family vacation.
That's where you get all your ideas, right?
And you see a semi with a tractor on the side, loaded up on it, and you speed up just to see what tires are on the. My family, they're so tired of that game, but I'm getting pretty good at guessing what it is before we get up there. But we're actually right now we tested with Iowa State University a new tread pattern. I don't really want to disclose anything, but it's a super single concept, but with a very radically different tread on it to help with emergence of the roads that you run over. And we tested it at Iowa State. So we pulled it and we got them out in the field running in the Boone area now. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting take on the tire when people actually see what it actually is. So.
Yeah, okay. We did some studies with the LSWs planting right in the track, and we found that by having the lower air pressure, you still have better yield even though you're driving right over the track, the plants, than if you have narrow duals that are high pressure that are creating pinch row compaction. So,
and you hear
but
stories
if you had a wide float that also didn't have tread marks where the seat is, then that's the thing you're talking about.
I cannot confirm nor deny. If I did, I'd have to kill you. But no, I'm kidding. But it's funny you say that because we're going to be coming out with a new promotion here because one of my ag specialists was in Cerro Gordo, Illinois, which is just north of Decatur. And this guy has 1250s on his combine. He's an LSW guy on his four-wheel. He's got 855-46s on his 9000 series, and he's got it on his combine. But he was running duals on his planting tractor. He's got two 8Rs. He was doing a planting trial, and he actually did yield studies on the affected rows of the planter. He calculated that he was losing almost $29 an acre in yield on the affected rows of the planter with the duals. His neighbor's running an 8RX, right? But he didn't want to spend the money on a track machine. And so he got himself into LSWs. This is without us even being involved. This is just him doing it. Put the 1100 4546 rear with the 1000 4532 front, and he did the same exact field 2 years later because he rotates corn and beans, but he did the exact same planting trial again, and he netted that it only cost him $2 an acre versus $29 an acre. So he had a significant savings in just the affected rows.
And he would have been because he was running lower air pressure in the LSW.
Lower air pressure, yep. He was in that 15, 17 PSI range, 12 in the front basically is usually where we set him up at. And then he did the same exact study with his neighbor who has a similar planter, but he went in and just did the same yield study on those affected rows. That 8RX was costing that grower almost $10 an acre.
So the 8RX was less compaction than the narrow duals.
But
not
more
than LSW.
Right, and we've seen that in our studies with, like I said, we do a lot of work with Iowa State, and we're almost 14% less compaction with LSWs than an 8RX when it comes to just ground compaction itself.
I think one study showed that tracks, I think that was in an 8000 T series, were equivalent to about 30 PSI on a tire.
Yeah, because when they're pulling, everything's on the tilted back, they're running on the back.
They're probably worse than the 8RX maybe.
But you know, the other interesting that we did on this guy in Cerro Gordo, because I've always been curious about it. You know, you're getting all this stuff, and we've seen it in our planting trials. We've done numerous planting trials where we've seen a plus up or whatever in the field, right? But think about the headlands, right? The end rows, right? Everybody just gives that up as the price of doing business. You're just going to run over it, right? They don't care, and they plant it last, and it's just buried, and it comes up so uneven, but they don't worry about that because it's got to be that. That's just how we do it.
Yeah.
So he pulled up his yield maps from that first year, and then this year he planted with LSWs. He had an average of 12% higher yield in the end rows.
Wow.
And there's about 9 acres to 80 acres. 9 acres of end rows.
So over 10% of your field is end rows.
Think about that.
Wow.
That pays for a set of LSWs like in 3 months, right there. Yeah, so we're pretty excited about that.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot for meeting
Well, I
with us
appreciate
and
the invite.
playing along.
Great chatting with you.
Yeah, appreciate you playing along with all of our little games.
Absolutely.
I think one thing that stands out to me after our conversation is there's a lot that we're aligned on as far as both of us, Titan and NTS, we're really focused on agriculture. We've narrowed our focus so that we could get better at it, essentially.
Right. Again, you know, when it's not your only thing, you get distracted and take your eye off the ball. And if people didn't know, we do have what we call ag specialists, and they report to me, and they're out with your service guys. They're out with the dealers.
That's one of the things that we've appreciated the most about when we sell Goodyear Titan tires is we always feel like we're going to get the best warranty support and field support if there is any issues.
Yep.
You know,
because they're on, and we're in the deep in the weeds. You know, we make between 5 of them, we make probably 1,200 end user farm business every year.
Wow.
So we're out to help you guys, and we're out to help the farm. Because you know what, if they're not having success, and it could be something as simple as inflation pressure, and it could be something as simple as ballasting on the machine. You know, first thing they blame is the tires, right? And then, well, who sold me that tire? Well, NTS did. Well, who made the tire? Well, you know, Titan did. But when you get down to it, it really isn't. It's just more of a setup issue than it is actually a tire issue. So we're there to support you guys, and we're there to support that end user.
Very good. Well, I think we can say we're aligned on our mission to help drive farms forward and help get the right tire system on their equipment. And I guess just to wrap up, I would just say to our viewers, if you have any questions, need any help about getting the right tire system on your equipment, we've got a great team at NTS that would love to do some discovery and come up with a solution that helps to drive your farm forward.